Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Yellow Chair devotional. Today's name for God is one that we think about a lot. We talk about it a lot, but we're going to look today as to where it actually originated. And that is God being an everlasting God. Maybe you've heard the song on the radio that goes, "You are the everlasting God." Right? Like, where does this come from? We're going to turn to that story together because it is the word in Hebrew, El Olam. El Olam. El being the shortened from Elohim, so God, Olam being eternal, forever, everlasting, the everlasting God. So where did this come from? Grab your Bibles and let's start in Genesis. Genesis 21. We are in the life of Abraham, and this is right before our episode with his son Isaac. It is right after Sarah has given birth and everything went down with Hagar and Ishmael. And now we're going to see this passage in Genesis chapter 21 where Abraham bargains with Abimelech. So Abimelech is a commander for the Philistines. It's often when we think of the Philistines, we think of David and Goliath, right? We think way forward in the Bible. Well, this is way back then, right? Just like the Israelites had a long history, so did the Philistines. And in this part, we're going to see how Abraham interacted with Philistines and Abimelech. So Genesis chapter 21, big number 21, and then verse 22, little number 22. And my heading says, Abraham's bargain with Abimelech. Pause the video if you need a little bit more time to find it. When you're ready, here we go. Genesis 21:22. Then Abimelech came with Phicol, the commander of Abimelech's army. They said to Abraham, God is with you in everything you do. Ooh, think about those words. God is with you in everything you do. So make a promise to me here before God. Promise that you will be fair to me and my children and my descendants. Be kind to me into this land where you have lived as a stranger. Be as kind to me as I have been to you. And Abraham said, I promise. Then Abraham complained to Abimelech about Abimelech's servants because they had captured a well of water. But Abimelech said, I don't know who did this. You never told me about this before today. Then Abraham gave Abimelech some sheep and cattle, and they made an agreement. Abraham also put 7 female lambs in front of Abimelech. Abimelech asked Abraham, why did you put these 7 female lambs by themselves? Abraham answered, accept these lambs from me. They will prove that you believe that I dug this well. And so that place was called Beersheba because they made a promise to each other. Okay, so in a little bit earlier in this story, there was a thing where Abraham's servants and workers had dug a well, and then Abimelech's men or some of his servants came in and started using that well and said, no, this is ours because this is our land. So that's what they're talking about here. Abraham's saying, we dug this well. Can we please use it? Here, I'll give you some animals as a way of like paying to use this well that's technically on your land. And Abimelech agrees to that. And so because they made that promise to each other, they called it Beersheba, verse 32. So Abraham and Abimelech made an agreement at Beersheba. Then Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, went back to the land of the Philistines. Abraham planted a tamarisk tree at Beersheba. There Abraham prayed to the Lord, the God who lives forever, the everlasting God, El Olam. And Abraham lived as a stranger in the land of the Philistines for a long time. So he planted a tamarisk tree. After this video, you can go on Google and look up what a tamarisk tree looks like. But one thing about them is that they are an evergreen, right? So that, like, if we talk about evergreen trees, it means that they don't lose their leaves in the wintertime, right? These trees are always green. And I think about maybe Abraham purposely planted a tree that never loses its leaves or that it's always green because El Olam is the everlasting God, the evergreen God, forever and ever. And it says, Abraham prayed to the Lord, the God who lives forever. Your translation might even say everlasting. That's El Olam. The everlasting God. Everlasting. What does that mean? Our brains struggle because we have a day that we were born. Sometime there's going to be a day when each of us dies. We don't live forever, right? We have a start and a finish. Maybe even you think about school, right? I started school in kindergarten and I will finish high school in this year, and maybe I'll go on to college or a trade or who knows what I might do, but there's a start and a finish. What about God? He has always been. There's no day when all of a sudden God was born, because that's not how God is. But our brains don't work that way. We think in beginning and end. So we're going to look at two more passages quickly together. One in Psalms chapter 90. So if we open our Bibles to about the middle, we usually run into Psalms. I ended up in Proverbs that time, so I've got to go backwards. If you ended up in Job, you've got to go forwards. Okay, so Psalms chapter 90. Chapter 90, so big number 90. And before before it begins here, it says that this is actually a prayer that Moses prayed, right? So Moses wrote this prayer. And so this is when Moses is trying to describe what does it mean for God to be eternal. The title for this one in my Bible says, God is eternal and we are not. All right, so we have a start and a finish. What about God? So let's read about how Moses tried to explain this. So this is Psalms 90. Lord, you have been our home since the beginning, before the mountains were born and before you created the earth and the world. You are God. You have always been and you will always be. You turn people back into dust. You say, go back into dust, human beings. To you, 1,000 years is like the passing of a day. It passes like an hour in the night. When people sleep, you take their lives. They are like weeds that grow in the morning, and in the morning they are fresh and new, but by evening they dry up and die. We're destroyed by your anger. We're terrified by your hot anger. You have put the evil we have done right in front of you. You clearly see our secret sins. All our days pass while you are angry. Our years end with a moan. Our lifetime is 70 years, and if we're strong, we may live to be 80. But the years are full of hard work and pain. They pass quickly, and then we are gone. Who knows the full power of your anger? Your anger is as great as our fear of you should be. Teach us how short our lives really are so that we may be wise. So what is this saying here when it's all about describing God as angry? All right, because when I think about God, I don't think about God being angry all the time. I don't feel like God's really mad. Well, let's think about when Moses was leading the children of Israel, right? Did Moses go through a lot of times when the children of Israel were frustrating? Oh, and things would happen and they wouldn't listen to what God wanted them, and God would be like, guys, can you just love me? Can you just stop? Like the golden calf idol. Think about how they would complain about having to collect manna or not having meat, and then God would provide them with quail. So many things. And they would whine and they would complain, and Moses would get weary. He struck the rock one time because he was frustrated, and they got water from it, but at that moment of anger. And so here when it's talking about God having anger, it's like that frustration that we experience at times, isn't it? Right? It's all this time, but it's also this idea that because God is eternal, because God is El Olam, the everlasting God, we don't understand everything, right? He has this great wisdom, like he is God. And it says here, like, you clearly see our secret sins. Like, it's showing that God just knows everything. He knows everything, and it angers him. Does it mean that he's angry at me? He's angry at sin. He's angry at the enemy, at Satan. He's angry at those horrors of this world that we have to endure. So now let's see how Moses ends here in verse 13. He says, Lord, how long before you return and show kindness to your servants? Fill us with your love every morning. Then we will sing and rejoice all our lives. We have seen years of trouble. Now give us joy as you gave us sorrow. Show your servants the wonderful things you do. Show your greatness to their children. Lord our God, be pleased with us. Give us success in what we do. Yes, give us success in what we do. Think about this. Lord, how long before you return? Do you ever say, Jesus, when are you coming back again? Oh, when are you coming back again to just make everything perfect and right? Moses is feeling that in this song. And he's saying, God, you are eternal. We are not. But when we encounter troubles, give us joy. Fill us with your love every morning. Let's look at one more passage together, just a few books over in Isaiah. So Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, Isaiah. And we're going to Isaiah chapter 40. Isaiah chapter 40, and this is another group of passages that talk about God as being everlasting and us trying to wrap our minds around El Olam, God always being eternal. So Isaiah chapter 40 and then verse 12. Verse 12, right? So pause the video if you need more time to find it. When you're ready, as we read this together, I want you to be looking for what is the one sentence or the one verse that really catches your attention, all right? We're going to start in verse 12. My heading says, God is supreme. That's another way of saying eternal, everlasting, great, mighty. So let's listen to this description from Isaiah. Who has measured the oceans in the palm of his hand? Who has used his hand to measure the sky? Who has used a bowl to measure all the dust of the earth? Who has used the scales to weigh the mountains and the hills? Who has known the mind of the Lord? Who has been able to give the Lord advice? Can you give God advice? Whom did the Lord ask for help? Who taught him the right way? Who taught the Lord knowledge? Who showed him the way to understanding? Does God have to ask someone for help? Did God go to school? Do you see what Isaiah is saying here? 15. The nations are like one small drop in a bucket. They're no more than the dust of his measuring scales. To him the islands are no more than fine dust on his scales. All the trees in Lebanon are not enough for the altar fires. And all the animals in Lebanon are not enough for burnt offerings. Compared to the Lord, all the nations are worth nothing. To him they are less than nothing. Can you compare God to anything? Can you compare him to an image of anything? An idol is formed by a man, and another man, if he covers it with gold and he makes silver chains for it, a poor man cannot buy those expensive statues, so he finds a tree that won't rot, and he finds a skilled workman to make it into an idol so it won't fall over. Surely you know, surely you have heard, surely in the beginning someone told me, surely you understand how the earth was created. God sits on his throne above the circle of the earth, and compared to him, people are like grasshoppers. He stretches out the sky like a piece of cloth. He spreads them out like a tent to sit under. He makes rulers unimportant. He makes the judges of this world worth nothing. They are like plants that are placed in the ground. They're like seeds that are planted, and as soon as they begin to grow strong, he blows on them and they die. The wind blows them away like chaff. Right? So here he's saying, we make an idol and you worship. Like, who made God? Right? Verse 25, God the Holy One says, can you compare me to anyone? Is anyone equal to me? Look up at the skies. Who created all these stars? He leads out all the armies of heaven one by one. He calls all the stars by name. He is very strong and full of power, so not one of them is missing. People of Jacob, why do you complain? People of Israel, why do you say, the Lord does not see what happens to me? He doesn't care if I'm treated fairly. Do you ever say that? Oh, God, it's just not fair. Don't you see what I'm going through? Surely you know, surely you have heard, the Lord is the God who lives forever. El Olam. He created all the world. He does not become tired or need to rest. No one can understand how great his wisdom is. The Lord gives strength to those who are tired. He gives more power to those who are weak. Even boys become tired and need to rest. Even young men trip and fall. But the people who trust in the Lord, they will become strong again. They will rise up like an eagle in the sky. They will run without needing rest. They will walk without becoming tired. El Olam, a God who is so great, our minds cannot even comprehend it. He always is, always was, always will be. He never changes. We can trust him because he is eternal. When in doubt, we turn to how Isaiah describes it, where he says, oh, the Lord gives strength. The Lord created the world. He lives forever, and he loves you. A great and mighty and everlasting God like that, yet he loves me and he loves you. That is why we praise and celebrate El Olam. All right, let's say a prayer together and then I'll show you our matching cards. Dear God, we thank you that you are El Olam. You are the everlasting God. We praise you. You have always been and always will be, yet you also care about us right here, right now. We are so thankful for that, and may we always turn to you to renew our strength, because you're the only one who can truly do it. We thank you for your love. In your name, amen. All right, if you're making the matching game with me, on one card we put the Hebrew, right? El Olam. And then we pick a Bible verse. I did our one from Genesis where it said Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba, and there he called on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. Then on our other card, we have it in English, the everlasting God. Hebrew Olam means forever, eternity, or everlasting. And so that means God is eternal. He doesn't have a beginning or an end. He never changes. We can trust him and his plans for our lives. And I put all this information in the video description below. All right, so then once you've made your cards on the front, how do we know that we have a match when we're playing matching? Well, we flip them over, we gotta have the same thing on the back, all right? So maybe it's a pattern, maybe it's a color, maybe it's a picture you draw. Just make sure it's the same so you know you have a match. Have a great rest of your day thinking about what El Olam, the everlasting God, means to you. And I will see you tomorrow.